Close the door, Hal. Just kidding. Thematic joke there for loosen up a little bit, people. Come on.
Joke.
It's an AI joke. It's Tuesday before lunch.
If you didn't get it, you should leave. Right?
That's right. All right. Well, why don't we dive in? Is everybody ready back there, my friends on the AV side of things? All right. Well, welcome everybody to Digital Hollywood's First Day Tuesday here, May 3rd. Today's session is about artificial intelligence and how it's actually being handled in a variety of our current consumer platforms, how it's being handled in our culture as it relates to business development, and what are the opportunities in storytelling because of AI. So our panelists all reflect different approaches to this fascinating topic of AI. And what we're going to do is go down the row and hear from them what their roles are and what role AI is playing in their business. And then we'll come back for some nice Q&A to dive into this topic, and then we'll definitely take some questions from you guys. And what we want to really do is look at the opportunities in this space and really a positive spin from this, because we all were discussing how AI sometimes has, a sort of dystopian approach, and we'll talk about that as well. And is everyone clear about the concept of artificial intelligence? Just raise your hand, like really what it means. Okay, great. Okay, except for a few of you who are robots? No, just kidding. Okay, another AI joke. I know, keep them coming, right? All right. All right, so let's start with Ari Popper, who is the CEO of a fantastic innovations house called SciFutures. So Ari, tell us about SciFutures and how you're looking at AI.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Well, firstly, it's great to be here. It's a really exciting panel. Not every day you get to talk about AI and our future and how it's impacting our lives, particularly as it relates to our culture and storytelling. So it's pretty exciting. So yeah, I'm the CEO and founder of a company called SciFutures. We're an innovation company, and what we do is we help our clients use science fiction to come up with really big, bold innovation, and then we build it for them as well. We work with some of the biggest companies that you know, and what makes our company really unique is we use science fiction storytelling as a way for people to really appreciate the times that we live in and, frankly, where things are going. We work with all types of emerging technologies, but AI is very, very interesting, particularly as it relates to these new emerging platforms that are developing. So things like IBM's Watson and obviously Siri and Cortana and Alexa. In fact, we do a lot of work developing for Alexa for ourselves and for our clients. What's really exciting about AI for me is that it's a science fiction promise that's sort of been hovering around for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, maybe even longer, that's really starting to come to life right now. I think the best version, articulation of it that we think that we're seeing right now in the marketplace is the Echo and Alexa. It's pretty amazing.
How many of you have an Amazon Alexa?
Yeah.
And do all of you know what an Amazon Alexa is? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. No? Would you explain it?
Yeah, so Alexa is Amazon's AI that is designed to help you interact with the Amazon ecosystem. It's not just about shopping, although you can shop. It's about being embedded in your home and your lifestyle in a way that feels really natural and seamless and really ties you into the Amazon ecosystem. The reason why it's pretty cool is because it's becoming very, very good at understanding utterances and then responding appropriately. I didn't say it was perfect, it's not. It still makes a lot of mistakes. But the mistakes that it does make are acceptable. And once you get to that point, you've passed the threshold. So when you think about AI and you think about the future, what we see in science fiction is a very clear vision of AI being ever-present, we like to say like ubiquitous computing, ever-present, and helping us improve our lives in a really meaningful way. As everything becomes connected, as big data becomes available, and as the world becomes digitized, these AIs will be able to tap into that rich data stream, and then through very smart algorithms, we'll be able to improve our lives. Again, it's not going to be perfect, and we're going to have lots of problems initially, but in 20 to 30 to 40 years, it will be ubiquitous. Each of us will have a personal AI. It'll understand us and it'll improve our lives. So anyway, I can talk for hours about this. I'll let other people have a chance too. But what we do is we really help our clients imagine the implications of where AI will be in the next 5 to 10 years, and then we build it for them. So looking forward to chatting more.
And let me just jump in here and say that if you haven't seen an Amazon Echo, it's just a speaker tower, and the Alexa is actually Amazon's OS that is a voice-activated OS. And so their first product to market was a speaker tower. Now they have variations on it, and other companies are building Alexa's OS inside of it, so that you're going to start to see products come to market where Alexa's inside of it as well. So I wondered if you could take one more moment and just talk about how you're working with Alexa and clients.
Yeah. So what's cool about Alexa, again, is that Amazon have an open platform. It's not perfect. It's still quite new. But you can develop for it. Anyone can develop for it. So what we're doing for some of our clients and for ourselves is we're developing skills. So one of the issues that we're seeing with Alexa is how children interact with it. There was a great article on LinkedIn the other day, which is the heading was, "Alexa is great, but it's turning my kid into an arsehole." And basically, that's because the way you talk and interact with Alexa, you don't use please. She responds to any utterance, and for young kids, it's reinforcing negative behaviors. So what we've done is we've developed a skill for Alexa where if you have kids in your house, some of you might have, your star charts, where if the kid cleans out the room or helps with the garbage, they get a star. Alexa can control that environment for you now. So the kid can say, "Hey Alexa, I took out the garbage," and then Alexa will say, "Very good, Jimmy, you got a star." And then mom can say at the end of the week, how does Jimmy looking on all his stars? And Alexa can say, "Jimmy has 5 stars. Would you like me to reward him with X, Y, and Z?" So it's still rudimentary, but it's very interesting. And what's interesting about it is you've got this assistant in the home that's now becoming intelligent enough to respond to the dynamics in the home and to improve our lives. Again, it's early days, but we all know through the pace of technology that the world is changing exponentially, so that in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, these skills and this ability, this amazing AI ability to improve our lives is going to be ubiquitous and it's going to be invaluable. We can talk about dystopia a bit later, but I'll leave it utopian for now.
So let's go over, thank you, Ari. So
Okay,
let's
sure.
go over to Seth Greenfield, who is the Chief Content Officer at a really fascinating startup, we say, called InPerson out of Israel. And how many of you have read the articles about Facebook Messenger and Zuckerberg making all those announcements about having bots inside of Messenger? All right, well, InPerson plays hard in that space and is one of the first companies to develop bots for Messenger, but they're doing a lot more than that. So Seth, tell us about what you're doing at InPerson.
So InPerson was founded based on the idea of giving personalities to AI. Having a computer that people could actually speak to. This is the foundation of the company. Our first target was Hollywood, actually. We came out of stealth last year, and we did a couple of projects for Universal. One being we created a virtual Doc Brown for the 30th anniversary of Back to the Future, where fans got to actually speak with Doc Brown through Facebook Messenger. That was one of the early adaptations of using a bot on Messenger. We also did something with Disney recently, where you were able to speak to Miss Piggy through Facebook Messenger, a full conversation. It was about authentic conversations between a computer simulating a character. The implications going forward opened up tremendously in the last couple of months. Both Facebook and Kik, Slack, many of the other platforms started opening up to having bots in there. And the question is what do you do with it there? A lot of stores started looking to put things on there. It's not just about Hollywood, it's about brands. We give them the opportunity actually to have a full conversation, authentic conversation with their consumers. And that's where we're headed right now is, it's something that we're actually creating conversational bots. We call them chat personas. but it will give the opportunity for any company to speak to the public, just like the way the public speaks to their friends in the place where they are. We started with the messaging service. We actually are working on some projects on Alexa also. Agencies love it. There's something there that people really can't put their finger on yet. It's a voice-activated system that the potential is huge, and it lives in the home. It's not the phone. It's not the same as when the phone came in with Siri. There's something very different with this.
And Seth, could you also talk about how the bot is going to help with commerce as well? Because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, so we started seeing a few projects in the last couple of months that, especially on Facebook Messenger, once they announced it, there were some stores that went on there right away. And one of the problems that they came in with right away is that they tried to basically take their website and put it in Messenger, and it's not native for it. What's native for Messenger is people. So you need to actually put a salesperson there. So you need to design a conversational bot that can be authentic, like a salesperson. It's not about offering everything. It's about offering a customized, great experience.
Now, is this better than when I was on a shopping site and it would just give me a generic web link because it picked up keywords? I mean, is this, because that would just irritate me. Did you guys ever get irritated by those kind of, so this is like much more than that, right?
This is about finding out about you, so it can personalize what it offers you.
And it will learn over time as I'm chatting with it?
Like any other human relationship, there's memory here. So if you go shopping today and you go back in a month from now, it's going to remember what you liked and what you didn't like, and not repeat things, and actually maybe make offerings based on what your history is.
Yeah, and what I love about that is there's a lot of discussion about consumer experience being sort of the new pretty girl at the party for most brands right now, and so being able to create personalization for consumers that come into the door. And so bots are going to be that way of doing that. Now, on the ad tech, martech side, we've heard a lot of negative chatter about bots as they fake the number of interactions that a brand's ad receives. So people are getting false reports on how many people have seen their ads. Does everybody know about that? So bots are being used in that way, but this is a different kind of...
These are conversations that's actually very easy to track, because we see the amount of time that people speak to the bot. So you can actually quantify it either based on the exchanges or just the time spent with it.
So will it be like, I'm just curious, will it say something like, don't buy that, you'll look fat in that? I mean, will it be like...
So, again, it depends.
Because that's helpful. You know, you want your friend to tell you the truth.
So it depends on the brand.
Yeah.
You know, the one big deal is with this is that with a conversational bot like this, every brand will have their unique voice. So certain brands might have that attitude.
Okay.
You know, but it's very important that if they're made authentically, that every brand's voice actually does come through.
And that's also echoes again what Ari was saying about building an Alexa recipe for a brand. Again, it's that IP, that brand attribute, now being translated in these different engines.
So,
That's great.
So is it disclosed that it's a bot, or is it meant to replicate like a genuine, authentic conversation?
So we've actually played around with this concept with some virtual characters that we built. It's always, if you lie to someone, they get very mad. You don't want to come right out and say it. There's actually a world in between there. I liken it to going to a movie. You know, when you go to a movie and you see someone flying on the screen, no one in the movie theater stands up and says that's impossible. So I think as long as you don't show the strings, people are willing to go along with the experience. But it's just a matter of giving them a great experience.
Great. All right, we're going to come back to that. Next, we're going to talk to Hardy Tankersley. And Hardy, for many years, was the VP of Innovation at Fox Broadcasting, where he really looked at all sorts of new platforms for the Fox network, not only on the storytelling side, but actually more on how do consumers interact with Fox content. So that he has that perspective, and then also he's doing some consulting now for some smart learning software companies. So Hardy, tell us about what your sort of POV on this crazy world is.
In two different roles, I spent the last 8 years at Fox, I guess so. I'm representing the Hollywood side of the digital Hollywood, and that's all about trying to figure out how all of this new technology affects how we consume and sell entertainment. And so what I think of when I think of AI in that role is what we always wanted. Like the fantasy is to be able to pull this data and like, hey Alexa, tell me is this a hit show? Model out what, like, I mean, ultimately what I want is, Alexa, do my job. So we're trying to figure out what that means, but the biggest thing that Hollywood's trying to figure out is how can we take big data, now that we're harvesting it through all of the social media and everything that's available online, and make me a hit show. And a lot of people are trying to tackle that problem. But it hasn't worked yet for a variety of reasons that we can get into. And then currently I'm consulting with a company called Silverdraft Supercomputing, which makes big computers. One of which was just announced last week is a GPU-based supercomputer, which is really optimized for machine learning and these kinds of applications. Because there's more and more is happening. And so I kind of want to delve into just a little bit. There's a couple of different components to AI. What you guys are talking about, which is how does an AI, how does a computer pretend to be human? But there's also all this learning. There's the paradigm shift that's happening is we used to program computers to do things by saying, hey, computer, if you see this, do that. And so a good example is image recognition. We've been trying to figure out how to identify a picture of a cat. And we would try to write rules that say, look for this range of colors and fur and little perky ears and paws and a tail. And it never worked. It was really hard until somebody figured out recently that if we just feed a neural network learning algorithm 1 billion pictures of cats, it gets really good. And what's fun about that is we don't know how it works, but it kind of works. So we're into this world of now what other big data sets can we feed a machine that can start to do things that we used to think of as human, that humans used to be able to beat machines at. And the landmark of this year was the Google Go computer, which is Go was one of those things we used to think of as uniquely human because computers couldn't be programmed to do it. And now all of a sudden we've got a computer that can beat everyone, and we don't know how it does it, but it works, right? So that presents a whole new world of craziness that we're about to enter.
And when you're consulting with this company, are they looking at applications for education, for business? Like, what's their spin on all of this?
The biggest immediate deep learning stuff going on is image recognition. So you've got all these like smart cameras, like the
Security.
Google Nest cameras, for example, have these algorithms that can figure out what they're looking at and alert you when they see some specific pattern. So when somebody opens the refrigerator, it can ping you and say, hey, I just saw somebody open the refrigerator. The cat walked by. I can recognize that. So this Internet of Things are starting to learn patterns and be able to identify things and do what we would consider smart things that used to be human. And then the entertainment side, we really still are trying to figure out how to. The biggest voodoo in the world is how to make a hit show, and what makes it. What combination of talent and writing and marketing and branding and platforms and all these things can combine to so that we can do it again. And so that's
data.
Kind of a big data question, right?
Yeah.
Now you harvesting all this audience data that we have now from all these platforms that we didn't used to have. How can we ingest that and use it in a way that we can build a business out of?
So there's the B2B side of this,
Yep.
which is the big data piece, and then there's the B2C, which is coming up with solutions that help consumers interact with brands.
Exactly.
and entertainment properties. So jumping over to Jay Barrage, who is the executive director for AList, which is the publishing arm of Eisenberg Group, which is a really innovative and hot boutique agency. I don't even know if we call it boutique anymore because you're getting so big, based in Pasadena. And the AList, if you've never been to an AList summit, they do these fantastic events, and they have a newsletter that I depend on to be able to be called a trendmeister. So I'm really just reading what Jay tells me to say. But Jay just came from an AList event in Seattle, which is home to Amazon and Microsoft, which are creating two of the largest AI engines. So Jay, give us your spin on what is Eisenberg and AList thinking about in this world?
Sure. So Microsoft and Amazon happen to be Eisenberg clients too. So we have some insight into this, and we have NDAs up our behinds on what we can talk about really. But one of the things that we brought out at the summit 2 weeks ago was that we had one of the creative directors from the Halo franchise come in and talk about Cortana, and how that was really developed as something fictional that's now actually turning into a real AI. And so,
What do you mean it was built fictionally? It was just an idea and a story, and then someone
Cortana, yes, she's a character in the Halo video game.
Okay, got it.
So she is an AI in there. So I think I'm a journalist. That's my background, and when I look at these things too, I'm just totally fascinated about where this is going. And one of the things that we talked about at this summit as a consequence of that is, what is next, and how do you apply this to media and marketing? And we actually have a data science group at Eisenberg too, called ION, which is advised by Dr. Galen Buckwalter, who's the data scientist behind eHarmony. And so he's looking at how can you mine all this data that's out there from social networks and stuff, and be able to do better marketing based on that, and also how to match content creators. We've identified 450,000 or so people who are influencers, in the sense that they're creating content mostly on these social networks like Vine and YouTube and so on, and match them with the brands that kind of have the same audience and the same values and so on, and in that way be able to communicate more effectively and connect emotionally as well, which is something that is otherwise hard to do when you look at data. So and what artificial intelligence can do much better than people is they can process just so much more data and information. So that is the perspective that we're taking on this, and why we find it so interesting, because ultimately what we want to do is not to create advertising that interrupts someone's content experience, but actually be part of creating better content, and ultimately content, whether it's brought to you by a brand or not, that people actually are seeking out and identify with, both on an emotional level, but also providing information and entertainment.
That's great. So I want to dig into some questions for the four of you, each coming from your...
Can I ask Seth
Yes.
a question?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
You see,
I actually-
AI takes over. It just...
I find it fascinating with bots, and I know this is a technology that I've researched a little bit, back from, when I was a full-time journalist. And I think AI dates back to, there's some research going back to 1950s, right, when there was a test developed, where you basically, the test was designed so that you can test an artificial intelligence, a computer, versus a real person, and then see how far you could go, right?
Turing Test.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
So how far are we now from being able to have an artificial intelligence that can effectively mimic a real person?
So when we formed our company, we specifically looked at the Turing Test and said it has no value. Because it was measuring something and being measured by people that had different perspectives on it. So I'll give you an example. One of the years when they were testing, one of the questions that all the computers were failing on and they were asking the bots, if I stab you with a towel, will you die? Now, who is human and who's not in the question? The person that posed the question, is that a human question? So that's where the Turing test fails. I could tell you with the conversational interfaces that we've developed in the last couple of years, I pass and fail it every day. There's certain conversations that I'll have. We have an intern on our website right now called Artie. Artie is powered by our technology. I have people that come in and say, if this wasn't a real person, it's great. And then I'll have other people that will come in just purely in test mode, not come in for the experience, and look to break it. And when they succeed in breaking it, they feel that they've earned a badge. So really, it comes into, again, the experience I said of going to the movie theater and seeing somebody fly. It depends on what your expectations are coming in. If you're coming in for a good experience, you'll have a good experience. So I think really that's the state of where it's at. And I'm not sure if it'll ever be able to be human. Mimicking human characteristics, I think, are what we're after. I don't know if we're actually after the other.
Right.
That is actually a great point to lead off this little tangent of why is AI always in our narrative world, in our entertainment world, in the stories we read, sort of how we've all grown up. Why is it so dystopian? Why is there so much fear associated with AI when you guys are all really talking about sort of great opportunities to manage data and to create better consumer experiences? So where is this fear coming from? And I'll start with you, Ari.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and we could probably could have a whole conference on that one. For me, I think it's the fear of the other and of losing control. So what does it mean for us as a human species to be able to create intelligence that potentially could become more intelligent than us, or an intelligence where we don't understand how it's getting to the answers that it's getting. It's just getting there. There's a tremendous letting go and feeling of being out of control. And I think what science fiction, think back even, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a great example of an intelligence that was created that kind of went out of control.
Because of the abnormal brain?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So,
Everyone know that reference, abnormal?
Yeah.
All right, come on, people. It's hump time in the day. All right.
That wasn't a Mary Shelley, though.
No, it's better than Mary Shelley.
Later addition to the canon.
So we should be wrestling with these issues. Science fiction is a fantastic way to do that, and it's fun. It's entertaining when AI's, if you've seen Ex Machina and
Her,
which
Matrix.
is really interesting. But yeah, we should be. But that doesn't mean there isn't going to be tremendous utility in AI, and it doesn't mean that it's going to change our lives in really profound ways, and it will, and it really is.
And make for a more boring story too, if she's just helping you plan your calendar.
Yeah.
Right, if Skynet wasn't taking over, would we all have watched like all 5 of those movies?
Yes. If all Skynet was doing was organizing your calendar.
Right. What do you guys think? I mean, Hardy, you sat right at the center of Fox's programming. Did they talk a lot about AI as a narrative point?
Yeah, we did Minority Report as a series. We did a bunch of things. It comes up all the time because it's a very interesting, dramatic, and narrative device. I think the reason that these things tend to be portrayed as scary comes down to trust. You don't know how you can trust these things. If you think about the way you develop trust with humans, it's a really complex process. You kind of get to know, how do you decide who you can trust, right? Who is your friend and who has other motivations? Mm-hmm. And the thing about these AIs is we don't know what their motivations are. Like, did they even have motivations? They've been programmed to solve a problem, but it's a very interesting, dramatic device of about if you trust this thing because it has somehow earned your trust. And it turns on you. We have Robopocalypse, right? Where one day all the AIs are gonna get together and decide to kill us all. Because it's a more efficient way for them to run, and that seems to be perfectly plausible.
Any other thoughts on that, Jay or Seth?
So I think,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Seth, no, Seth, you go ahead.
There's certain AIs that we live with that lose the name AI. All navigation software is AI. Once it becomes part of our regular life, we sort of
Forget about it.
forget about that it's AI. It's actually navigation is a very interesting case with it because there the bot is telling us what to do. It's a
Right.
complete role reversal at that point.
Right.
It says make a right, and we're act like robots and turn the car right.
Yeah, I mean, do you guys remember the Thomas Guide? I mean, holy crap. And I mean, you had to actually pull over to the side and figure out what you were doing,
There
I
are
still
also
have to do that,
examples
but-
like one of the interesting things about like airplanes all fly themselves now, right? But a few years ago, so airplanes fly on roads in the sky, right? And those roads are loosely described as like a tangent, and humans can fly along that line, and they see somebody else, or they know somebody else is coming, and they know not to hit them. But computers, as they got really good, started to follow that line extremely precisely. And so if somebody was coming the other way, like nobody had designed the system to allow for just even 100 feet of leeway, because humans were always just sort of within range. But now that the computers are in charge, there was a crash over Brazil because the computers ran into each other because they were both right on the line. Whereas with humans that wouldn't work. So there's a whole interesting category of like computers take things very literally, right? And that's what gets scary, is the unknown consequences of such, and it's very difficult to predict.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's good storytelling, right? That they turn on us like that. That makes for a good story. But I do think that in reality, though, there are just so many use case scenarios that we're just starting to see for how useful artificial intelligence can be. And one of the things that I find just fascinating are these nanobots, the really small robots that they're saying not too far away, like in the 2020s, will be able to be inserted into your bloodstream and basically help your immune system fight diseases and cancers, and be able to go in and prolong your life, basically by the evolution of this, will go so fast too that they're thinking that they can add 1 year life expectancy for every year after 1920s or something like that. So
That's crazy.
And those will be, if you think about the evolution from the supercomputers that used to take up a room to now basically your watch being able to access the cloud and then a supercomputer that way, it's not incredible to think about, these nanobots that are just, so small, being able to access all this information and just live in your system. You're kind of becoming these cyborgs and fixing any issues with DNA or whatever. Just we can make ourselves more intelligent. And
Well, I don't
that's
think-
another good sci-fi
I don't
movie.
think you can
once
really
we-
make me any more intelligent. But anyway, what about some questions from the audience before I go into mine? Yes.
So you mentioned Ex Machina.
Yeah.
How far away are we from using search engines in that capacity?
It was a cool premise, right? He had a search engine company, and he used the algorithm to use that deep learning and that.
Have many of you seen Ex Machina?
Yeah.
Don't see it by yourself because it's creepy. Okay.
The how far away questions, it's really hard to answer. If you talk to Ray Kurzweil, we're talking about a singularity in like 2045, I think. I honestly couldn't answer it, but I think if we know anything based upon our past, the future happens a lot quicker than we think. And part of that is due to the fact that as human beings, we have these heuristics, we have these biases. So like we greatly overestimate what's going to happen in the short term, but we completely underestimate what's going to happen in the long term. I can't answer the question, but we should be thinking about it. It's a good
Anybody
question.
else want to tackle it?
Yeah.
I mean, what should, are most of you content creators? Or, yeah, most of you. So what should a content creator right now do to prepare for this world of AI?
Oh, I can take a stab at that.
Yeah.
So one of the things we discussed up in Seattle too, which I think is fascinating, is virtual reality, right? So if you see the evolution of creative expressions with humans, now, being accelerated with the internet and everything else, they're thinking that if we can add intelligence and artificial intelligence and create these virtual reality experiences, then just look at Avatar. Those are kind of the creative canvas that you possibly could create this whole new environments and experiences that as an artist must be super exciting, because most of the stuff that we've been doing, if you think about it, we've been painting in two-dimensional spaces, whether it's traditional painting or a book or even a flat screen on the wall. But now we're starting to being able to sculpture or create three-dimensional spaces, and that's really exciting.
I think from a conversational standpoint, from the creative side, it opens up a whole new area. It's interactive. We've had interactive with games, but this is something very different than that. Game technology is very tree-oriented. It takes you in different doors depending on what you do. In this case, the opposite side, the character, actually can morph over time depending on your attitude towards it. It will change its attitude. So it's not a matter of just new opportunities opening or closing. How it relates to you will change. So I think from a creative standpoint, this is what I design. As head of creative at the company, I'm more like a producer. I have 7 writers that work for me, and they actually work with the tools to create this creative content. And then you put it all together into a living organism. So I think as more creative writers especially get their hands on this and start understanding what it is, I think we'll actually learn what we can do with it.
So you have to have a content strategy for AI, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you saw there's some case studies recently about Mattel developing a smart Barbie that could talk to the kids and listen to them and respond. And I mean, that gets really weird really fast.
Yeah, it didn't meet with a lot of positive.
Yeah, well, it had a bunch of issues because it's not very tolerant, kind of like kids with Alexa. Like, the bot will take abuse that a human would push back on.
Right.
And the kids don't kind of understand that. It's very difficult to have Barbie and her AI brain very eloquently navigate the politics of
A 7-year-old.
a 7-year-old slave master. Right?
Yeah.
It gets
Even
weird.
a parent has trouble understanding
Yeah,
politics of 7-year-olds.
it's hard enough for us.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting challenge as content creators try to create an intellectual property, which is a character, which is a computer. How to navigate the politics of that. I mean, even within the studio, it's almost impossible for us to do, because the writers who own a character do not want a computer to take their jobs. Right?
Oh, so have they all pushed back any time there was?
Oh yeah, they would.
Because there was Twitter applications. A good friend of ours had Social Samba, which was a Twitter engine that actually talked to you in the character's voice. So they would have,
Yeah.
Social Samba's taken over by, was it Walking Dead or one of those shows?
Yeah, it's very difficult to get the writers to allow
'Cause it's their IP.
creation
Yeah.
to be, in a sense, it's having them automated out of a job.
So, in the end, though, it is dependent on the writers. The AI will not create the content. It just needs a different type of writer.
Right, it's very different kind of writing.
And even the abuse, all that is just things that it's very easily recognized as long as you build it in. I mean, for example, if you try that with Miss Piggy, she hangs up on you.
There's a Miss
Which is what
Piggy
you-
bot, in case you guys haven't come across it, and we'll get to you right away, sir. Ari, did you want to add to that?
I think in terms of content, one of the ideas that I'm really excited about is this idea of the brand as an algorithm. So as the world becomes digitized, and as these big data sources become available, whether it's social data or biometrics, and as the Internet of Things becomes more viable and becomes online, every device that's connected is going to give off data. So for brands to be relevant in the future, they need to behave more as algorithms, and they need to be able to take this data, like what you're doing, and convert it into a brand lens or brand experience, particularly if Siri or Alexa are going to become these ubiquitous portals to the marketplace. So if the way that you're interacting with brands in the future is through Alexa, then how do consumers find your products? The way they find them is through you understanding the data and being able to be there for them in a brand relevant way.
It's a different challenge too, coming from the brand side of things or the agency side of things, right? Because the brands also need to have a personality, and like all AIs can't be the same, right? Because then why would you choose one particular one? So you get it's the same challenge that any brand has right now that becomes become a modern brand. And if you decide to have a chatbot, then what kind of voice will it have, and how will it answer to abuse? And and right now there's going to be a ton of people trying to break it, and especially if it's learning. We've seen examples of that where they've tried to put out Twitter bots and stuff like that, and they've
went really
actually
well.
broken them and turned them into Trump supporters.
Yeah.
So
That was Tay a month and a half ago.
Right.
Which is the danger of putting a bot out there that learns, that doesn't have a vetting process.
And where was Tay? Was that on Snapchat, or where was it?
Tay was...
It's on Twitter.
Twitter,
That's
yeah.
Microsoft.
because you have to be very careful as a brand too. You should not take political stand. There's some topics that you should perhaps stay away from. And if you do take any stand in certain values or issues and so on, then you got to make that very clear. And especially as AIs are learning too, then they will take in feedback from customers and so on. And that's a human process too. Like, what do you listen to and what don't you listen to?
Right.
And
It still needs us to do it. We had a question back there, sir?
As you move from entertainment and using artificial intelligence, also as direction, information gathering, you move to interaction. It looks like all four of you need something that's something like the Good Housekeeping of Google, but it's psychologically, because the more it moves to interactive, you're having an impact on people's psyche, right? So it's no longer just turn left or right. You're making people feel good or bad, or inducing bad behavior in kids or good behavior. And I was curious, is there any psychological certification in place to sort of escort this whole process in the future?
That I'm aware of.
Are you working at all with psychologists or professional,
Great question.
So
thinkers?
it's entertainment at this point.
Yeah.
When you make a movie,
Yeah.
you're not employing psychologists. And if it's a commercial, the store responsibility to the public is not there like that. It's not a manipulative type of product.
It's a great idea, Hardy.
I think as soon as the legal department discovers this going on, that's when we're going to have an issue. But they don't know what's happening yet, and nobody. No, I'm not going to tell them. It's
Right.
That's
And
gonna take a while, right?
the brands all have
well, the
their
first
Bibles,
lawsuit, and
right?
then like the whole everything changes
Right.
as soon as the first lawsuit
And
comes in.
Jay and I know, because
Game over.
I did agency my time. I'm a recovering agency person, and brands all have Bibles that they follow of how they're allowed to communicate their attributes, and so that, in a sense, is what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, with AI though, how do you create a Bible that's kind of self-learning and for every possible scenario?
Yeah, it's a great question.
So
So we're in very early days. I saw some more hands over there in the middle. Yeah, let me get Mr. L over there.
Oh, hi. First of all, Aliens 2, the robot was a hero who rescued the little girl.
That's right.
Yes.
But that's only because in Aliens 1 he wasn't.
I see.
Fair point.
In social VR is an emerging field, and one of the best AIs in social VR is a human behind the avatar, so the human is the AI. Have you
The
seen
Wizard of
any-
Oz.
Have you seen, yeah, exactly. Have you seen any experiments where they're combining human avatars with AI avatars in the same social VR space, and what the response was?
Humans and AI together. Is that marriage? I mean, what is that?
There's the counseling bots at USC. You know those ones, Phil?
No.
They're really interesting. So the U.S. military has developed a AI counseling program with USC. I think their emerging media lab or
Their gaming lab, yeah.
It's pretty-
Tracy
Yes.
Fullerton,
Skip,
yeah.
So they're doing work with PTSD, but that's more on the VR side. But they also have counseling bots that have structured therapy sessions that are basically just complex decision trees, and that a human, I think, monitors them. That's the closest that I can think of, and it's pretty effective from what they tell us.
I don't know if this answers if this is what you're looking for, but there's the Facebook M, the mystical M bot, right? Which is Facebook's prototype interface for the work for everything. You can ask M, and there are other people that have developed these kind of agents too, right? Where you can ask it anything, and there's sort of a first pass, which is the AI tries to answer the question, and then the AI, if the AI can't solve it, it'll escalate to a human, but the user never sees the difference,
Yeah, I think-
never knows whether the bot or the human is talking.
I think Facebook M right now is 95% human and 5% bot. But they know by taking in the data over time that will
Right.
slowly start to shift.
That could be a good
Yeah.
barometer of
Yeah.
Of how
where we are.
fast.
singularity.
How
But
fast
again, I think that's an example of like the boring side of AI,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it will take over a lot of these tasks. Like the IT department, the first question that they have is like, well, have you restarted the computer? You know, and like they could have that on
Well, almost
And
all
AI
customer service is bots anyway,
Right,
right?
right.
It's just a human reading off a script anyway.
right. So it'll make our lives more interesting because we don't have to deal with those kind of issues.
But I think if you're looking for a good like fictional account of human and AI, The Diamond Age by Stevenson, or A Young Lady's Illustrated Primer, that's the full title. Have you read that?
No,
That's-
it's like 1,000 pages.
Oh, all these books are like, God. But it's a really great example of AI and human interaction.
We've also been through this experience, right? Representative.
Yes.
Representative.
Right, agent, yeah.
Agent. Right? Just
Which
shut
is
up, bot.
it's a great way to take out your anger and hostility. Was there another question? Yes, sir.
Curious, there's been some narrative out there that bots ultimately replace apps. Just curious what you guys thought on that.
So
Replace apps in what sense?
Like brand apps that are currently on our phone, and, from customer engagement and from a marketing perspective.
Right. I mean, I can answer it. I'm sure you guys have more experience with it, but I do think from a branding perspective and trying to cover trends in the space, you know, that what brands are trying to do is to provide some kind of utility now, right? So, you know, if you're Home Depot, if you can create some kind of AI app that will help you fix household things, then that will create goodwill, and you can brand it and you can do that kind of stuff. But I don't know if it will replace all the apps. I think it's just one side of it.
Yeah, I mean, if I could, one spin on this is that what a lot of people are saying is notifications are replacing apps, and so that messaging is coming out and bringing people in as opposed to someone going into an app. So notifications / bots / some sort of pushed conversation out is what's happening. Does that make sense? So a lot of us now are responding to a notification that comes on our phone, and we go into it, and half the time I don't even know what app it is anymore. I mean, how many times have you guys gotten a message from someone and you're not sure if it's Facebook Messenger, SMS, email? I'm like, I know I heard from that person today, but I'm not sure which thing. And that's the world that we're in, is it won't matter what the channel is anymore as long as the notification gets to you. So I think that's
so
part of this.
people are not downloading apps. On average, most people use 5 apps total, and 3 of those are usually a social network. So That's why bots are replacing it. Because they feel there's the only way to connect now with the public. If they're not downloading the apps, and there's zero growth there right now, the only way to actually get them is on the social network that they're already on. And, you know, if you look at teens right now, the whole under 25 group, they're spending over 3 hours a day in messaging, active in messaging.
Right.
If you want to reach them, that's the only way you can get to them.
How many of you have just, in iOS, if you're an iOS user, how many of you have enjoyed where someone's calling you and it says, maybe Bob Miller, right? That is a form of AI, right? Don't you love that when it tells you who's actually calling you? Or when Google Maps pops up and says, if you leave now, there's light traffic, 15 minutes. All that is this same thing, but it's being pushed out to us. So that is a kind of bot, right?
Yeah.
And we're
And
all enjoying it.
that's also what our Ion group. I'm not an expert in that, but it's predictive marketing analytics too. It's the bots are or the processing is so smart that it can predict that the
What you're
need
gonna
for
do.
you to have a certain kind of notification and that you would actually
Respond.
respond to that.
Yeah, I think it's smart. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so, we sort of tend to anthropomorphize AI, and my question is sort of like, if it speaks human, doesn't mean that it thinks human, right? And in Hollywood in general, all the stories involving AI, I don't know what you guys thought about, Ex Machina, I thought that was incredibly shallow, and I mean, it didn't seem that people really had a grasp on what was the bleeding edge technology. So what are your thoughts on the first question, and also how AI could be presented in a more interesting way in these sort of entertainment scenarios?
And what was do the first question again?
If it speaks human doesn't mean it thinks human. And where is that dissonance in there?
Yeah.
Because nobody really, sort of like we think that it's not entirely human,
Yeah.
and it speaks to us in this very human way.
Yeah, I think it's a really great insight, and it's true. We tend to anthropomorphize everything, even our cats. It's just humans do that. I haven't seen really great examples of it in film or television, but some sci-fi that I've read treats, I'm going to call it AI, but it's really aliens, really in a really clever way. Some of Austin Scott Card's work, he talks about aliens that we can relate to that are basically human in different form, aliens that are not really human, but we still can relate in somehow. And then there's this category of the third alien, which is the completely unknowable other, kind of no interface at all. And that's kind of where I think you're going. I think that's really interesting. You don't see a lot of it, but at least I haven't seen a lot of it. But it's really
What would be
fascinating.
more interesting in the treatment of AI for you in Hollywood?
In Hollywood, treatment of AI.
What could be the more interesting stories that I'm being told today?
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Well, you're gonna have to
I
pay him
I
for
can
that.
I can take a stab at it.
Yeah.
Some people talked about this up in Seattle on the summit too. So they talked about artificial intelligence and all the data, and that Facebook and all these places. You can now import all this data, and a person in that sense could live forever, because the bots can learn about their behavior, their likes, whatever. So essentially, if that person dies, then you could still continue to interact with that personality. So it's kind of the same thing as thinking about cloning animals, right? Is it really Fido if you cloned him? And but no, but maybe it provides some kind of comfort. And is it really your grandfather that you're talking to? This bot might be able to give you his kind of answers, and that provides some kind of comfort. But again, you can see the dystopia element in this too.
Yeah.
But it is kind of an interesting answer to, like, is it human or not, or just because it speaks human? Well, it's absorbed all this information about the character, so it can essentially, with the processing power, become that person.
So I think we need it to be human-like. It's not a matter of human. We have a need for it to be human-like. And that's what we're going to end up building. It's not a matter of creating a new species. We're going to want, we're playing God here. We're creating a species in our image. And that's probably the best way to look at this.
Well, that's my point, is that we're trying to humanize it, except the way it works, the way its brain works is not human at all.
Yeah.
No,
That's right.
Nobody tells
No,
stories
but
about
there's
that.
find two people that think the same way. And I think that these are unique. And I think the differences we'll see here is that there won't be two bots that'll be the same in the end. They'll each be unique in their own way as well.
I agree that humans anthropomorphize everything, right? But it reminds me of like Siegfried and Roy, right? They were friends with their tigers.
Until.
And then you realize that the tiger's a whole different thing that you can't actually relate to, and I think of every AI I can think of in fiction sort of starts as it's written as a human,
Right.
but it has either nefarious motives or superpowers and or quirks.
Right.
But they're really written from a dramatic standpoint as humans with weird things about them. I think when you actually start developing AIs, they're nothing like humans. They're more like aliens, and we don't know how they work, right? Which is the really interesting part. They're unpredictable. But to relate to it is a bizarre, as a fellow human, because that's what we do as humans. We relate to it like social animals, right? It's very difficult you certainly can't replicate that.
Yeah.
You can fake it for a while.
I think one of the reasons that you created Sci Futures was to look at how science fiction is predicting how these things will be used, right? I mean, it's...
Yeah, not so much predicting, but more, because if we take this topic of AI, the potential is profound, and we've spoken about it on the panel. But if you can create these, let's call them semi-utopian narratives about where your brands in the future could be using AI, what's really exciting about the times we live in is you can start to build them and create them. But to get people to move and get them excited, this storytelling, plausible storytelling, speculative fiction about the future in a really compelling way could be a very interesting way to explore the potential for AI in whatever business you're in. So that's what we do, because it's very hard to try and imagine where the world's going to be using PowerPoint slides and data. It's just hard. But we like to say, stories are data with soul. If you can tell these really compelling stories about AI being really useful in a narrative context, then everyone can relate to it and get to it. Anyway, but that's what we do. But I think this idea of AI as other and how we relate to AI is fascinating, and we're going to wrestle with this for years, right? I mean, we're just starting.
We're in the heart of it.
Yeah.
You had a question?
Yeah, since, let's go, what's your first name? I'm so sorry.
Seth.
Seth, since life begets life, you mentioned that you kind of play God. Does it change your personal belief on like philosophy or
Creation?
creation itself?
So,
This is the
I don't know if
Scopes
Miss
monkey
Piggy
trial
or
now.
Doc Brown did. But the idea of creating these characters or personalities that people speak to, and you see relationships form there, it does change some outlook on it, but for the positive. I got to tell you, for all the pushback that we anticipate, we see very little of it. We actually see people going in and enjoying this. I think what happens is we play on fears always, and the truth is that it's really dependent on us. We're the ones designing this stuff. So if AIs are going off the map, it's because we designed them that way. They could be used for very helpful things. They could be used in business for brands to connect. They could be for great storytelling. There's a lot of useful. We use it for navigation, like we said, every day. But it really depends on what we design them for. If we want to create another bomb, we could do that too.
One last question before we wrap up. Anybody? So I'd love to just hear from you. If you were a brand or a content person right now, what would you do next? Would you find a developer who knows how to build for Alexa or Siri? Like, what would be the thing you would look at right now? Just Fireline.
Me?
Yeah.
Hire a data scientist.
A data scientist?
Yeah.
And what is a data scientist?
An expert is understanding how to use all this big data that's been produced, developing algorithms to make sense of it. I think that's what I would do.
Okay.
I'd hire great creative minds, show them the tools, and say, what would you do with it?
Like InPerson, perhaps?
Yeah.
Hardy, what would you do next?
I think just as a pure marketing exercise, I think plugging into Siri, Alexa, Cortana et al. Is a worthy area of exploration.
To start to
'cause
play
those
there.
interfaces are going to keep getting more and more mainstream and everywhere, and they're going to be at least a way that your brand and your content are interacted with.
Great.
A very simple application is just chatbots. I think that you've seen with Messenger now on Facebook and in their latest quarterly report how many people are using chats right now, and I think that's a great way for brands to basically follow the consumer demand and create that kind of artificial intelligence that can serve some kind of purpose and actually add some value, whether it's entertainment or actually information, and depending on what business you're in. So
That's great. Let's have a hand for our panel. My name is Lori Schwartz, and I always forget to introduce myself, but I'm with a company called Storytech, and we help brands and technology companies understand these emerging trends. And check out my podcast, The Tech Cat Show, on techcat.tv. And thanks for coming out. We'll see you all week here at Digital Hollywood. Let's have another big hand for our fabulous panel.
Thanks, Lori.
Hello, I guess on behalf of Victor.
Oh,
Only exchange I need your